Okay, so let's get started. So any suggestions to this one? So we have a suggestion. First, I was thinking about knight takes, rook takes, then rook takes e5. But then after queen c1, rook e8, knight takes, queen takes. Yeah, that looks fine for black. And Matt, you also had rook takes e5. So I'm not sure. Rook takes e5. Maybe queen c1 is a good move. It does attack the rook and the queen on e1. So there's a better move here. So this position can be argued, because you could argue that white is simply able to calculate all the way to a win. And if that's the case, then it's not really a, let's say, a long-term piece sacrifice, if you can just calculate your way. So, but bishop takes e5. So we want to play rook e8, but we want to get rid of that knight. So that is, that's what we're going to do. Let's say something like rook moves. Takes, check. And then queen e6 check. Wins the rook. And white is 2 pawns up. So let me see. If rook d8, then h4. Yeah, that looks correct. There's problems here. So yeah, I think you're right about this. And then if queen f5, say, we can finally bring this into the game. So now we win that's a good point. Mm-hmm. So and what if knight e8? What does white play then? Bishop f4. Yeah, that's a killer. And then knight is simply hanging. And then after that, the rook, and game over. So as I said, this could be calculated, a few sidelines, and so some of the other positions here are more, let's say, long-term sacrifices. So this is a Tal game, by the way. Black to move here. So actually in this game, Tal, he sacrificed a pawn very early on to get a slow initiative. And now we got to this position, and here black had a very strong continuation. Mm-hmm. How do you want to continue, Paul? So we have here knight takes f4, g takes f4. Rook takes e1. And now bishop takes e1 is not possible because of knight e3. And we have to take with a knight. And then what's the point? Yeah, queen h4. So sacrifice the piece, but there are all kinds of weaknesses. White has a bad coordination. We still have 3 pieces to attack with. This pawn might actually come in handy as well as an attacking piece. So black is already winning a piece back now with a decisive attack. So he tried bishop c1 just to protect again along the second rank. And now black simply took that took the piece back. And h3. And let's see, even material. I like black's next move because I mean Talo was a great attacking player, but so it's tempting to start calculating knight e3 and everything. But he just went back to h6 because he's going to land something bishop f5, and then the knight will go in, and then this queen and knight, and this king is permanently weak, and so he's just black has time here. So that was very convincing. Okay, so this is what happened. So he actually went into opposite colored bishops. So this is what happened. And then bishop takes h3 is simply winning. Okay. Let's see if he takes here on h3. We have a nice little idea here. So, and a very nice move. So there are simply some checkmates beginning with bishop g4, f5, ideas like that. This is what happened in the game. Yeah, so let's move on. Let's see how it all ended. It ended like this, and then white just resigned. Let's see. Okay. This was white to move. And in this position, queen e7. This is a line I analyzed in opening simulator. And let's see, bishop f3. And in this position, black should play knight h6, but knight to f6 is a mistake. Why? What should white play here? Yeah, I got one correct answer in the chat. See, knight takes c6, take d6, and bishop takes c5. So in this position, so here's a question. So every position is different. So let's say if black plays queen back to d8. Here we should, can white actually take that rook on f8 and then play something like c5? Or should we simply go back with the rook, like a normal thing to do? So that's something interesting to consider. So the ancient claims a winning advantage here. I must admit, I don't remember all the details here. And it might be that black should play queen c7, so that in case of this, and maybe c5, we can take it out. So so every position is different. Let's say if bishop f2, then I don't know if knight to g4 is an option. So if black takes here, we can take on e5. So that's a good question. Does the bishop ever drop back to a3 and b4? Well, it is, this diagonal seems to be the most important because we want to use the bishop to support the pawns, but also in the defense of the white king. So dropping back to this diagonal here, I mostly see it being on this diagonal. I also see examples where, let's say, the bishop drops to this square just to win a tempo, and then the pawn starts running, and then the bishop later comes back. But being on this diagonal, the green one here, a7, g1, is more to the point. Because on a3, let's say, the bishop is too much on the queen side. So it's more natural to keep it on that long a7, g1 diagonal. Okay, but this is a huge advantage for white. So that is the solution. So let's move on. Okay, what do we got here? This is white to move. So what should white play here? Is it knight takes d6 or knight takes c5? What do you think? It's interesting. In the attacking manual by Jacob Agard, he has this idea that should attack the opponent where he's strongest. And it seems like this dark squared structure is somehow, let's say, e5 is protected twice and d6 is protected twice. But nonetheless, this is where white breaks through. Yeah, knight takes d6 is the move. But he played knight takes c5 in the game, actually. And knight c7 is simply, yeah, Paul, you got it. This is simply to get this knight out, and then there will be trouble on g7. It just, there's this nice idea of rook a7, and then if knight takes, we can take back with the queen and also defend e5. So so there is actually, this looks tough for black, but there's some defending that can be done here, and black is hanging on. So I think that's what black actually played in the game, and he was hanging on, barely. But so the idea is, I got that in the chat, and then it's simply rook takes g7, and then suddenly after this we have bishop takes e5, and then we're just winning. Yeah. So black can try all kinds of knight takes d3 to have a knight fork on f2. I think that white can just retreat the rook, and then if the knight moves back, let's say, what is white's killer move here? Yep. It's very hard to defend e5, so queen a1. It's quite a funny position. And yeah, we sacrifice the piece, but once we get e5, and everything is falling apart. Okay, so again, the breakdown of the dark square structure in the center. that was the solution. So this is black to move. This is my co-author of Opening Simulator, Andreas Hain. He was the black pieces here. So what to play in this position? So black was just able to break through here. Knight takes g4. And then rook takes c3. And here there are all kinds of problems. If rook takes, then knight e4. And if queen takes, what's happened in the game, then knight takes d5. And everything is simply hanging. So, so you can calculate your way through this sacrifice, but I would say the knight over here and the open white king is factors that make it more likely that this sacrifice will work. So either white tried something like this, and in this position, now black is threatening that bishop. So there's no time for any counterattack like this. Bishop moved, the queen went out, and now I think he's just ready to slip away with the queen if necessary, the king if necessary. So white resigned at this point. Okay, let's move on. So this is a famous example, but it fits in well with our theme today. So white to move here. Any ideas? See, if we look at this position, we see that the black knight is hanging. So that might give us a tempo soon. This knight on a5 is out of the game. So white started an attack on the king side here. He played knight e3. There's some lines. If you take, then queen comes to g5. You can take on f1. This suddenly gives black a very strong initiative over here, with open lines for the rook. So, but this knight e3 was underestimated by black, and then suddenly after bishop takes, rook takes, white's pieces are all coming in the game, and black's pieces are not really cooperating. So let's see, knight, bishop g4 is on the way to e6. Then he actually sacrificed the second exchange here. And now if king f8, then queen is coming in here on h8. It's very unpleasant. So you have to go rook f7 and then knight e4. And now it's clear to see that white's initiative is just huge. Knight f5, knight takes d6. And black tried something like here. King went to the corner. And here comes a nice end to the game. Does anyone know how this game ended? Yeah, Matt, you got it? So, bishop takes, rook takes, and then, yeah. So what's the next move in the chat? Bishop takes f7, rook takes. Paul, what's the point? Here we go, queen h8. And yeah, black just resigned. I think queen h8 and then resigned. So it's very nice. We end up simply a knight up. So that was a strong initiative. White suddenly developed. There are, of course, many different factors involved, but one of them was surely that this black knight was just standing out there, as we talked about earlier. This one, what would you suggest white to play here? See, this is a game from 1993, and I would say it's already a classic because in this game, white actually ends up sacrificing all his material, basically. Yeah. So the idea is knight d5, but in the game, white prepared it by playing a4 first, because that pawn on b4 is going to be a little bit loose, and this pawn is going to help us with ideas like bishop b5 later. So this is what happened in the game, and we can start to consider why this might be strong. Okay, so the king is still in the center. Black is lacking coordination between his pieces. White has all kinds of ideas to quickly improve the position. Knight can jump into e4, d6. So black's position is a little bit in disarray. So that's so this sacrifice was made possible by this space advantage. So the tricky thing is, of course, it doesn't always work. You cannot just copy paste knight d5 piece sacrifice to any position. But in this position, black has been very negligent to common development of the position. And suddenly the knight is still stuck on f8 and the other one is on h5 and king is still in the center. So black has underestimated that the position is not so closed as it might have looked. So I can just briefly show you. I'll send it in the base. But it's just fun to see how white sacrificed all his material. Bishop b5 came here, and we have to take that. And then he took on b5. If queen b7, then something like this happens with, too many pawns on the 6th rank. So he took here. And now queen c6 attacks the rook, defends the bishop. Rook here. And now black actually traps this bishop on e3. But rook a7. So let's see. Take here, then it's queen d5 is a killer. And queen has to defend that bishop on c8. So it's checkmate. So so black played knight d7. And here white sacrificed the rook to play queen d5. Black took the bishop, check. We took the rook on d7, check. Went to king f1. And here, white is able to sacrifice. So rook f7 check. Then d7. And now we took the queen. And c6, the last sacrifice, could also sacrifice the queen. So c6 is a winner. And now e4 is a good way to get counterplay, maybe, because the bishop can try to get in the defense. So c7, e3. Yeah, and you guessed right. White takes that rook and promotes the queen. And then we just have to get over one last trap. Now we get that g6 pawn. And after e2 check, we just have to make sure we take the right pawn here. Yeah, shouldn't take e2, but that was black's last trick. And then after king, bishop e3 check, we just have to go to e1. And then black resigned. So white sacrificed everything else but that c pawn that eventually turned into a queen. So a very nice game. A modern classic. Okay. So of course, knight to d5 doesn't always work, but it's definitely worth. Here, all the factors worked in white's favor, like black king and center, bad cooperation between the pieces. So this idea of getting two connected passed pawns, it's like in the King's Indian position. This wasn't exactly from a King's Indian, it was more like an old Indian or some mixed Indian to begin with, but it's still some of the, I think it was a King's Indian with a6 and c6 and then b5. So, but the same ideas still apply. Okay, let's go for the last one. It's a very powerful performance by Korchnoi. And you can probably guess how it all starts out. So, and then again, black is ready to sacrifice the exchange just to gain dark squared control. And here, white plays the bishop to b6, and that is simply to win time. So bishop f2, then bishop b6 is a little bit faster. And since the black probably wants to keep the queen here to get quickly to the king side somewhere, then bishop b6 makes a lot of sense. Okay, and then c5, g4, and then d6, threatening d7, forcing black to make a decision here, takes, and then bishop to h3. And Korchnoi, he plays very powerfully here. He doesn't even mind about this this rook on f1. He just goes ahead and sacrifices the exchange here. So this idea of these two passed pawns in the center, white has already sacrificed a piece, and when an extra exchange, then he's a whole rook down. So this can really change how we see the value of the pieces in a position like this. So time is of the issue here, so white doesn't bother too much moving that rook. So he simply played king to h1. There are still so many pieces left on the board, and the passed pawns can be supported. So so he simply went along like this, and white is winning here. So one impressive thing about this game I found was that okay, he wins the rook back here, and then we get into this kind of endgame after queen d5. So Korchnoi is content with only what looks like only a small advantage here. It's actually materially even, but black actually resigned after knight takes d5 because the rook on c8 is hanging by the bishop. So it really went down to the bare minimum, and white was winning. So that's quite powerful. With white, you can, in a position like this, you can sit and think about, you know, you want to win in a way that's more safe, or you keep control, and instead it goes into this, you know, almost equality, and then so, but there's a problem on the c file. So small advantages, and then suddenly black is just lost. So if rook c6 to stay, then rook c1, and there's trouble on the c file. So so that's always impressive to see how these very strong grandmasters, they can even let themselves be with even small advantages in the position. So, or what looks to be like a small, but it's actually very big. So, no, I think it's still in stages. Let me see. That's a good question. Do you think this final position was in Korsnak's mind from the start? So what I think happens is it's a mix between calculation and intuition. And so let's see this sacrifice here. So Korsnak sees that black doesn't really have any counterplay going. There's no rook on the g file. So black's counterplay is more or less non-existent. And once we get to this position where he sees, okay, now I want my rook back, then there is the question of this c5 pawn. So he might have wondered about that. In this position, he might have wondered, okay, I can win back my rook now, but what about the c5 pawn? But then I still have the bishop. I'm still very active. An endgame would still be good for me because there are multiple weaknesses. So his feeling was still good about the position. So it's still in stages. But then he probably calculated a lot, like knight d7, because this pawn here looks to be in trouble. And knight d7 is also attacking that bishop. And here, knight takes c5, there might be all kinds of problems with, I don't know, bishop c4. There might be multiple problems with taking here. So I think before he at that stage, before he promoted on d8 and won back the material, he probably saw a lot of tactics around the c5 pawn already, because, you know, it's such a strong calculator. But I think he only took it from, I mean, the moment queen e6. So it's difficult to foresee a move like queen e6. I just, in this position, is already winning. So I don't think he calculated further than this. And then here you start to look more like what happens if the c5, is it going to drop? And then you suddenly realize, okay, if it takes there are all kinds of problems. Maybe my rook comes in, I have an active position. And then, maybe he saw all this. I'm not sure exactly what he saw there, but it's definitely in stages. So it's a mix between calculation, intuition, and a very good feeling for the position. I played King's Indian for a long time, and once you go into these simplified, most endgames are actually good for white. And the fact that white has the bishops here and pieces are just more active. And that rook was maybe about to enter the H rank in some positions. So it's just, or maybe even G1. It just looks very pleasant for white. So yeah. So what more can I say? So yeah. And then once they start calculating, once they start to get a firm grip of something they can calculate well, then they are just very good at that. So yeah. Okay, that was all for today. And I will see you next week. Okay. You are welcome, and see you soon.